Hello and welcome back to another episode for Project Seed Money. My name is Sharissa Bradley, and I am so excited that you are here. I am joined today with author J.A. Forde, and we are just so thrilled to have you. I got to meet you in person at an author event a couple of months ago, and it just totally brightened my whole day that you were willing to come and do an interview with us and help inspire my audience. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be a part of it and just to, chat about books and writing and all the things. So, yeah, I'm super excited to be here.
Yay. What got you started in writing? Have you always been someone who dabbled in writing, journaling, and things like that? Or was that something that came later?
So, for me it came later. I have always been a big reader. I love books. I love to read. Always loved to read. And so I really kind of picked up reading a lot more during kind of the COVID time, a little bit past like initial COVID, but just because I needed places somewhere to escape a little bit. And so I read a lot and kind of fell into like the bookish Instagram world, kind of falling into a lot of book accounts and just finding new recommendations that way. And in doing that, just fell in love with reading even more. And so started connecting with authors, connecting with independent authors, especially, but just authors in general, and started reading some of their books, working with them in their advanced reader teams and beta teams, where even before it gets to like editors and stuff, sometimes they'll have readers kind of read their books to give feedback and kind of on, does this make sense? Is there anything that, is weird? So I started doing that and just really loved that process and being part of the writing process, being part of just connecting with authors that way. And so then just kind of got a wild hair thinking, maybe I could write a book. I don't know if it'll work. I don't know if anyone will ever be able to read this, but maybe I'll try and write something. And so I did. I like just kind of jumped in with both feet and started writing and just really loved it. Just fell in love with the whole process. And so, yeah. And then, now 2 books later, I have books in the world and it's just crazy.
That's so incredible. That's so incredible. I hadn't heard that version of the story before where you get into writing through kind of the back end of it, like the behind
Mhm.
the scenes, which then created that inspiration for you. That's incredible. Did you always read in the fiction space?
Yeah, and then I had a good section of time, kind of when my kids were really little, that I read a lot more nonfiction, where it was stuff on motherhood and parenting, and just kind of like in like the self-help, professional development, personal development space. I think just because I needed guidance on my life at that point. Like that's how it felt at least. So I read a lot more in like that space, like was reading like Brené Brown and Jen Hatmaker and just so many of these like just really inspirational women and stories and stuff. So I definitely had a chunk of time where I read much more specifically in kind of that space. And then kind of got back into fiction in that like 2021 2022 timeframe, and then just kind of really dove into that. And I feel like my shelves exploded in terms of how many books I was buying. My husband was like, we move a lot, like why are you buying so many books? But it was just a really fun space, and like I just love to escape into a book, and you can go to so many different worlds and so many places, and I just love that about books. So yeah.
I couldn't agree more. I absolutely love the ability to dive into a story and go to that place, which makes me think of the books that you have written because they take place in very different places, very different settings. So even for myself as a reader of your books, I got to go to Australia and I got to go to the slopes of Tahoe. And I'm so excited for where we get to go next. I'm sure you love hearing your readers say, like, I devoured your book in one day. I cannot wait for the next one. And you're like,
Yeah.
great.
It's definitely a love-hate relationship on that because it's like I love hearing it. Like I love hearing that people are excited, but it's definitely that like I promise it's coming. It's coming. But it's like, but yeah, no, I love hearing that because it feels good to know that people, are resonating with the stories, that they make people happy. They're, encouraging people to read. I've had a couple of friends of mine that are not fiction readers at all that have been like, I just could not put them down. This encouraged me to like read fiction again. I haven't read a book for pleasure in like years. And like, so it makes you feel really good that like it's encouraging people to read. It's making people want to get into books and stuff. So, and then yeah, it's that balance too of being like wanting to be okay, how fast can I get this next book out? Because I want people to have it, but also wanting to make it as good as possible and not rush. So it's like that balance of making sure that there's both. So yeah.
Yes, and if you're going to a whole new place, like I'm assuming there's tons of extra little details that go into books when they are not like in your home location. So be patient, everyone.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of research like with Sydney, like I've been there. I went to Sydney in college and studied abroad there. And so for that book, I had a lot of details I could pull, but there was also a lot of things where, like, fortunately, I have a great editor and her husband is from Australia and she has like lived there with him and stuff. And so there were things where she would be like, yeah, they would never say this. Like, they wouldn't call a truck a truck. They call a truck a ute because it's like a utility vehicle. And it's like, well, that's a good thing to know. Things I wouldn't have picked up on as a 19-year-old in Australia. Very good things to have. And so it'll definitely be similar with this one where there's a lot more research tabs. Like my poor computer has so many tabs where I'm like, how would someone say this? Or what would this look like here? Because there's just a lot more research when it's not somewhere that you live and like can go walk around. Like Tahoe was much easier because I've lived there. I've been, in this space for so long. It was like that one was so much easier to be like, I can just like picture it in my head so easily, but it's a little bit more challenging with other places. So,
I can only imagine. I've never written in the fiction space. I wish my brain thought in stories like that. I only write in nonfiction because, like, as an educator. So I'm always
mhm.
so impressed when someone's like, wow, you got from A all the way to Z and all of the dots are connected and you did it in a different country. Like, that blows my mind completely. So you kind of shared how you got into writing, and that was such an interesting origin story. But once you did get to the point where you have this manuscript and you're starting to get to the publication part of it, did you face any challenges when it comes to like the vulnerability of putting yourself out there, putting your stories out there? Did you have any like pause during that time of like, oh,
Yeah, I mean, you definitely have those moments where imposter syndrome pops up where you're like, is this going to be good enough? Like, I read so many books. So it's hard when, like, because there's a lot of comparison of like, is this as good as what somebody else is writing? Is this worth the amount of time, effort, money that I'm going to put in? Is anybody going to read it? Like, those things are definitely there. And you definitely have days where it's worse than others. Some days it feels very like where you're like, no, like this is great. And I'm so happy with the way everything with this book is. And then you have other days where you're like, this is trash. And I'm just going to start over. So, it's definitely a roller coaster of kind of learning which voices you want to listen to and that are believable and which ones you don't. So, like, I try and stay out of reviews as much as possible because, like, that's a reader space where it's more of like that's a space for other readers to get an idea of if it's a good book for them. It's not really a space for me as an author. And so I try and stay out of that as much as I can because some people are really mean. And it's not because they're trying to be mean to me personally, but like if I go and read it, it feels very personal. So I just try and like stay out of that space as much as possible to where just kind of helps me to stay on like my path and write the books that I want to write without it being like super subjective to every single person's personal opinions and things. But yeah, there's definitely been points where I'm like, I don't know if I can do this. Or like you get kind of stuck on like writing something and you're like, what if I never can write again? Like, and it just is, there's all kinds of feelings in there for sure.
I'm sure my audience can relate to every single one of those feelings. I know I should certainly can. Did it get
Yeah.
easier when you published your second book? Did you feel any less of that since you had already gone through it the first time?
It was really interesting actually. Like, in a way, the first book was easier to write because I had a lot less pressure on myself in
Oh,
writing it, at least, because I was just kind of like, we're going to see what happens. I don't know where this is going to go. And so I had like a lot less pressure on it. Where with the second book, I was like, okay, I now have these readers. I have this fan base that's so excited for this next book. And like, what if I let everyone down and it's terrible and they all hate it? So there was a lot of pressure with the second book of like, okay, what if this doesn't live up to like the first book? And I feel like it needs to be even better than the first book. So that was kind of hard. The publishing process was much easier the second time around because you, like, obviously I knew how to do all of the things. So a lot of the stress of the publishing process was easier because I had done all of that before. But the writing, I think, was actually a little bit more challenging just because I wanted it to be perfect and I wanted it to be just so good. And I've noticed that I don't have quite as much of that feeling going into the third book where like I've kind of like I feel like I'm a little bit more comfortable where like I'm like, I can do this. Right now it's in like a very messy first draft stage, which feels like there's a lot of like trash. I'm like, is this a dumpster fire or is it great? I'm not sure. But that's just first draft life where you're like, I don't know whether or not this is great or trash. I'm not not sure. Like, but in the end, and like some of my writing friends, we say like you can't edit a blank page. So like even if the words on the page are not great and you're going to end up scrapping them later, at least you have something to work on. Like you have something to like edit and fix later. And so we're always just like, just get something on the page and you can edit it later. It'll be fine. Like figure it out.
No
Oh,
one ever has to see that first part.
yeah, exactly. I have one friend that reads my first draft as I'm writing it to give me feedback. And otherwise, no one ever sees that draft because it's messy and it changes so much and stuff, but like that's just part of the process.
That's totally fair. You mentioned having this writing community. Did you have other people who were kind of encouraging you and supporting you? Because that fear, that's a real thing. That's a real thing you have to push past. So I'm wondering what gave you the courage to push past it? Was it a community push? Was it your own internal, like, I got to see where this goes? What gave you that push?
It's a little bit of both. So like I just never was somebody who had like one of those like really passionate like career goals like growing up or something like where I was like, this is what I want to do with my life and I'm so excited and passionate about it. I kind of like went through different phases of things and had just never found that, which is fine. And some people that's just the way life is and stuff. And so I just kind of was like, this is just how it is. And so then to find writing and enjoy it so much was really just incredible. So there was that piece that really kept me going of like, I enjoyed it so much and I loved doing it. I've finally found something that really gets me excited and I'm like excited to sit down and write. I'm excited to, do these things. So that was part of it, but definitely the community aspect and having some people that I could go to and be like, I'm having a major imposter syndrome day and I need you to talk me off the ledge of like deleting everything and just like putting my computer in the trash, And so then you have those people and they're like, okay, talk me through like where you're coming from. Why are you feeling this way? Did you go read a bad review? Did you do that to yourself? Or where is this coming from? So, having that community was huge. And so much of that came from just really kind of plugging into the book community on Instagram. I've made so many friends there and stuff that I read for early on that now like those are friends of mine that read for me and you know just kind of having to put myself out there in that space a little bit to make those friends and it's hard to get there but it's been so worth it because I've made some truly amazing friends that I never would have even some of them are like some of my absolute best friends and I've never even met them in person. They're purely internet friends which makes my husband just die. He's like you don't even know I do know them, like, just
He's my
in
best
person.
friend.
Yeah, like, I met my one like, she's legit, like, my best friend. I met her last year for, like, 6 hours at one point, and, like, we'd been friends for, like, a year at that point, and it was the first time we were ever meeting, and my husband was like, "Are you sure she's not, like, an axe murderer?" And I was like, "I mean, I'm pretty sure she's not, and I'm just gonna go meet her for coffee, and we're gonna see how this goes." And I love her. She's not an axe murderer, and she's great. But it's just so funny that, like, these people that I've never met, like, but I talk to them every single day, and they're these amazing, supportive authors and stuff that can come alongside and be, okay, it doesn't suck. You're going to be fine. This is not a forever problem. You'll get past it and stuff. So, yeah.
I love that. It sounds like you have a really, really beautiful community, and I'm so grateful for it because I love reading your books. I cannot wait for more of them. Hopefully, for like the rest of my lifetime, you'll be like, those ones that we have like in our cohort. Like, I
Yeah.
always read the J.A. Forde books on the first person on the list, and maybe that'll be the case. I hope it is because it's so cool. I'll just show our audience we've got book one, which was On the Slopes of Tahoe, and then book two, which is On a Flight to Sydney, which you're actually wearing the sweater for, which I think is
I
so
am.
cute.
Yes.
There's a little
My Harbor Ground sweatshirt. So,
that is
yeah.
so cool. I absolutely love your writing. I'm so, so glad that you did decide to go ahead and push through that fear because you have an audience that loves your books. So it was all worth it.
Thank
Um,
you.
just to kind of close out, is there anything that you would say to our audience that is maybe like sitting on the fence? They've got the idea, they want to write, and they're just not really sure like how to motivate themselves to get forward. Is there any way you can just share some wisdom to just to kind of encourage them?
So I guess the hardest step really is just writing it, even if it's hard and even if it's messy. And also just kind of taking that pressure off. With my first book, like I said, I didn't have a lot of pressure on it. I wasn't like, I'm going to publish this book by X date and I have all these like wickets that I want to meet. It was just like, I'm going to write it. I set some goals for myself around how much I wanted to try and write. But if I didn't meet those goals like on a daily basis, I didn't stress about it, and just kind of taking some of that pressure off on your first kind of foray into the space. And also just knowing that like your first book may not be the book either. I actually wrote like a significant chunk of a different book before I kind of set that aside and came back to and wrote Sydney. And because sometimes it just doesn't work out and you're like, this just isn't the right book or it's not the right story. And just really giving yourself the space and like the grace to change and like pivot to something else, or to write less or more depending on what your schedule looks like, because everybody's in very different places in their lives. And so I would say just don't give up on it because the timing isn't working or the story isn't working. Like kind of look at it and think, okay, is there a different story I could tell? Is there a different timeline I can give myself to where I'm not, because you want it to be fun. And if it's not fun, then maybe you need to take a break or you need to give yourself some, additional space from it to kind of think about it. Because if it's not something you're enjoying and it's not fun anymore, what's the point? Look at it from that perspective. And like I said with my friends, you can't edit a blank page. So if at the very least, just get the words out and then you can go forward and make changes to it and make it what you want it to be as you know, as you work through edits and things like that. But there's not anything you can do with a blank page other than write on it. So try and get words on, and then the rest of it kind of comes in whatever timing works for you.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much. I just realized I think I said the books backwards. Is Sydney first?
Sydney is first. Yeah.
Yes, I think I said
Yeah.
them backwards. So it's On the Flight to Sydney is our first one, and then The Slopes of Tahoe is the second one, and then there's a third one coming out in the future. And
Yes.
can you please tell my audience where they can find you?
Absolutely. So I'm on Instagram at the.sah.author mom. So it's kind of like the stay at home author mom. So the SAH author mom. And that's my primary like social media. I do have a Facebook page under author J.A. Forde as well. And my website is authorjaford.com. And that has like all the information for my books and contact information and everything. Through my social media, there's a link tree there that has like if you want to sign up for my newsletter, which goes out usually twice a month and has other author recommendations, book recommendations, and then little updates about what's going on with my writing or books that I have coming out, things like that.
So amazing. And there's also links for all your awesome merch that goes with your books on your website. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah. And so there's like hats and sweatshirts. I have an amazing friend of mine that does merch. And so she and I partnered together. And so she's like licensed to sell merch that has stuff with my books on it. There's like a beach towel for Sydney, which is really fun. Like there's just some really cool stuff on there too.
That's amazing. Thank you so much. And thank you for spending some time with us today. I really appreciate your value and your insight. And I'm just really grateful that you gave us some of your time today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. This was awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me on another episode for Project Seed Money. I really hope you enjoyed this interview. And please don't forget to like and subscribe because it really helps the channel. See you for another episode next week. Bye.